Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition. It's only Tuesday, but die-hard bargain shoppers are already lining up to get their hands on Black Friday deals. We'll also show you what San Diego researchers are doing to prevent simple yet potentially fatal operating room mistakes.
Plus, we'll take an in-depth look at why there's an $84 million budget discrepancy between the new independent budget analysis and Mayor Sanders' projections. And we'll explain why advocates for a drug reform law are asking families for photos of empty chairs at the Thanksgiving table. I'm Peggy Pico. Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A new report says surpluses projected by Mayor Jerry Sanders could turn into deficits over the next few years. The city's independent budget analyst cites uncertainties, including pension reform and the end of redevelopment agencies. Here's a comparison of the mayor's projections and the independent budget analysts. The city's chief operating officer says he may have to dip into reserves if there's a shortfall. We will talk with him in just a few minutes on Evening Edition. After years of negotiations, an agreement between the U.S. and Mexico was signed today to cooperate on managing water from the Colorado River. KPBS senior news editor Mark Sauer joins us from the News Center with some details on this. Mark, what are the main points of this deal?
It's a 5-year agreement. Water agencies in Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada will buy the amount of water used by 200,000 families in a year. Mexico will get $10 million to repair irrigation canals ruined by the 2010 Easter earthquake.
Now, this also includes a promise to buy more water from Mexico later on, right?
Yes, and allow that water to flow south to the border and to wetlands and agricultural areas decimated recently by drought and diversion of water upstream. What's truly historic about this deal is Mexico is allowed to store water in Lake Mead below Hoover Dam.
Not everyone is happy, though, about this deal.
That's right. Water officials in Imperial County, the single biggest user of Colorado River water, refuse to be part of the deal. They see it as a water grab by the Metropolitan Water District, even though MWD promised to discuss sharing some of the water in the coming years.
KPBS senior editor Mark Sauer. Knott's Soak City in Chula Vista is being sold to SeaWorld San Diego. The water park will undergo extensive renovation and reopen in June as Aquatica San Diego, joining SeaWorld's other two theme parks in Orlando and San Antonio. It will feature rides and a variety of exotic animals. SeaWorld says adding animals brings an educational component to its water park. Terms of the deal are still being negotiated. Retailers have been promoting Black Friday sales for weeks now, and they've apparently succeeded in getting some folks' attention. KPBS business and environment reporter Eric Anderson says a handful of hardy souls are camping outside a La Mesa Best Buy store, hoping to score some deals.
I gotta clean my temporary house out.
25-year-old Rhiannon Buckingham is not going to endure another year of disappointment. She just missed a special deal on a big screen TV last year.
Last year I was back in the line, and I said, well, this year I'm not going to do that.
Buckingham's been camping out in front of Best Buy since last Wednesday. She's hoping to save about $200 when she buys a 40-inch flat-screen television on Black Friday.
I've been camping before, so it's not really any different, except there's a bunch of people staring at you this time.
Buckingham's birthday is next week, and she considers this shopping adventure her present. And she says she's not going to be missing Thanksgiving with family and friends.
No, actually I'm not. I'm going to have it a day later. I'm actually going to miss the day of Thanksgiving, but I'm not going to miss the feast. I'm going to have it the next day.
Look at me. I'm walking.
Retailers are also hoping they feast on bountiful sales this holiday weekend. San Diego State University business professor Miro Kopik says the typical consumer will spend about $700 this year, and many consumers are already doing their own virtual camping.
60% of consumers have actually started shopping already online. They're looking for things that they're interested in buying. They're seeing when those deals are going to happen.
Locking in those sales early in the season could spell success or failure for retailers. Kopik calls it a zero-sum game with winners and losers.
So if they're not going to go to retailer A, they're going to go to retailer B, and if retailer A doesn't start early enough, they will not have a chance at that discretionary spending.
Eric Anderson reporting there are just 5 shopping weekends to go. This is actually the longest holiday shopping period since 2007, with 32 days between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Federal regulators have rescheduled a meeting about the future of the San Onofre nuclear plant. Its operator wants to restart one reactor at 70% capacity for 5 months to get data about the tubes in its steam generators. Leaky tubes have kept the plant shut down since late January. The meeting is open to the public on November 30th. That's a week from Friday at the Hills Hotel in Laguna Hills. A new report says San Diego has some of the most military-friendly colleges in the nation. The Military Times ranked Cal State San Marcos 50th out of 68 four-year colleges for having a veteran center and giving college credit for certain military training. Cuyamaca College in Rancho San Diego and Alliant University in Scripps Ranch were also named in the report. It was based on responses from 650 colleges and public universities. Outgoing Mayor Jerry Sanders projected a $5 million budget surplus for San Diego next year, but an independent budget analysis warns the city could face a multi-million-dollar deficit. Peggy Pico has more on the report.
Instead of a $5 million surplus, a just-released independent budget analysis, or IBA, found uncertainty around the cost of the city's shift to a 401k pension plan and payment sources for redevelopment projects like the convention center that may result in an $84 million city deficit by the end of next year. Here to talk about this potential budget discrepancy are San Diego's Chief Operating Officer, Jay Goldstone, and City Council member Todd Gloria. Thank you both for talking with us today. Before we get started, I want to take a look at the numbers. The revised IBA outlook predicts an $84 million deficit compared to the mayor's nearly $5 million projected surplus. And that gap continues for 5 years, ending with a possible $43 million deficit in 2018. So my question for you, Jay, right off the bat is, how did the city arrive at their numbers?
Well, first of all, I don't read the IBA's report to suggest that there will be an $84 million deficit or a $43 million deficit. How we craft our outlook is that we take a baseline approach, looking at the kinds of services that we're providing right now, our actual legal obligations on a go-forward basis, as well as where our revenues are going. And based on all of that, what we knew at the time we released the outlook, we had a $4.9 million projected surplus, and even in the IBA's report, she does not dispute that information.
What do you think about that, Todd? Is the numbers, is that the reason you think the numbers are so far apart, or do you think there's something else going on?
I think the independent budget analyst is raising a number of issues that are risks, some of which have extremely high price tags associated with them, and signaling to the city council, who she works for us, to prepare for this, and that's what we'll be doing. But there is certainly a range that's there. I like to tell people, budgeting is a lot of numbers and figures, charts and whatnot, but really in actuality, it's an art, and so there are a lot of subjective and things of that nature that we have to couple in, and that's what you're seeing with these dueling numbers. And specifically looking at the discretionary and indiscretionary funds, IBA looked at the increased support for the arts as a non-discretionary, as a discretionary fund, and also the impact of redevelopment funding, pension plan losses, and changes due to Prop B. So basically, I guess my question to Todd is, were these budget concerns between the discretionary and non-discretionary funds part of the reason you opposed Prop B? Well, one of the reasons I opposed Prop B was for this very reason, which is that it actually costs us more money in the short term. I think if you ask the average voter who supported Prop B, they wanted to end pension mistakes and thought that this was a way to reduce the bill. And the fact is it actually increases it. I don't believe most people understood that. A $22 million hit to next year's budget is a substantial amount of money. It could be, several libraries, many rec centers. That's what we're dealing with.
But Jay, you had mentioned before that you thought that these were kind of short-term, sort of paying the piper up front, but in the end it would benefit San Diego. Talk about that.
Well, there's no question. And I want to also point out, though, that even in our outlook where we're projecting the $4.9 million surplus for next year, we laid out the risk to the city as it relates to the pension payment, to the loss of redevelopment dollars as well. All we're doing on the pension payment, and I do not disagree with Councilmember Gloria that that money might be able to be used elsewhere, but we're accelerating the payment of our liabilities. It's not costing the city more in the long run, but clearly in the short term, we're dedicating more revenues towards paying down the pension liability.
Let's move on to redevelopment, because that's a huge, that's something a lot of redevelopment agencies, maybe many of our viewers will call kind of shut down over the last couple of years. Did the mayor's projection kind of factor in this redevelopment and where the money was coming from, and we may not have it?
It did. In the 2013 budget that the City Council approved, that was proposed by the mayor, we set aside funds to at least address short-term some of the loss of redevelopment money to cover debt service payments that might have to be picked up by the general fund. We've also been able over the years to build our reserve balances, and we're above the 8% target. That should not necessarily be the floor, but that's what the current reserve policy is. And so we have resources that could help the city, weather some of these uncertainties. Especially
with the redevelopment, Todd. How has the city, or have they, I should ask, prepared for redevelopment costs like, the convention center, Petco Park, some of these major projects?
Well, as Jay has mentioned, we've created contingency funds. We've held our reserves and actually grown them beyond their targets in anticipation of risks like these. And we're being aggressive in pushing back against some of these takings. A lot of these things are executed agreements with legal deals and bonds associated with them. We believe we have a legal standing to push back against Petco Park, against convention center, and some of the other things, and we'll continue to do that because it's the right thing for San Diego taxpayers.
Okay, our viewers can watch or look at that full report on our website. Todd, Gloria, Jay Goldstone, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are more than 35 million surgeries every year in the U.S. Most happen without a hitch, but sometimes an object like a surgical sponge is left inside of a patient. These kinds of mistakes can be life-threatening for the patient and expensive for the hospital and surgeons involved. Now a company with a research arm in San Diego has come up with a high-tech solution. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the idea is catching on, but we want to warn you, some of the video is graphic.
One thing you can count on during surgery: there will be blood. Surgeons use super-absorbent towels, called sponges, to mop up blood and other fluids. Once they're soaked, the sponges are put in a receptacle. At the end of the procedure, nurses do a manual count of the sponges to make sure they're all accounted for. Only then is the patient finally sewn up and sent to the recovery room. That's the way it's supposed to happen. But every year in the U.S., an estimated 4,000 sponges or other surgical objects are mistakenly left inside patients' bodies. UC San Diego surgeon Tony Perricone says sponges left behind can become a major source of infections.
Because your body's trying to fight it. So it will continually cause an inflammatory condition in the patient, and it will continue to worsen. And worst case scenario, it actually causes a complication where maybe it erodes into an important vital structure.
It happened to Nelson Bailey, a judge in Palm Beach County, Florida. He had 2 intestinal surgeries at Good Samaritan Medical Center in West Palm Beach in 2009. For months afterwards, he was in pain. It kept getting worse. He had numerous x-rays and CAT scans. Finally, doctors identified the problem. The surgeon had left a 12-inch by 12-inch sponge wrapped around Bailey's intestines. Bailey went to another hospital to get it removed.
The surgeon who did the operation there told me when he opened me up, it smelled like a sewage plant. There was infection in there, and I was lucky I hadn't gone to a stage of being fatal.
A company called RF Surgical Systems, which does its research and development in San Diego, makes a product designed to eliminate these kinds of medical errors. It's a surgical sponge that contains a small radio frequency tag. At the end of a surgery, an electronic wand detects whether any sponges have been left inside a patient. CEO Kevin Cousins says it's the brainchild of a surgeon at Cornell University.
He came up with the concept after a long, grueling surgery where, in essence, at the end, there was a miscount. They spent almost an hour trying to rectify the count through an anthill of bloody sponges and gauze. They counted them all. They had to bring it in a portable C-arm, and he just thought there's got to be a better way.
A C-arm is a portable X-ray machine. Patients are X-rayed if the sponge count is off. Cousins says his system is not meant to replace the manual counting of sponges.
What our technology is a extra level of safety. It's an adjunct to counting. The nurses do a great job in counting. This is a way to sort of validate when there is a miscount, when they miscount, as well as when their counts are correct. Because interestingly enough, most times when there's a retained object, it's when the counts are falsely correct.
Indeed, one study reveals 62% of retained surgical objects were found after the count was mistakenly reported as correct. The RF tagging system includes the monitors, wand, and sponges. It costs about $10 per surgery.
It sounds like a no-brainer, right? You get the latest technology, it's low cost, and it prevents medical errors. Even so, not all hospitals want to use it.
San Diego's Sharp Memorial Hospital performs more than 20,000 surgeries each year. The director of surgical services, Beverly Self, says her hospital is familiar with the radio frequency tag sponges, but she says Sharp has decided to stay with its current system.
This is a lap sponge. This is used mostly in our abdominal areas of our patients. This is X-ray detectable, so that if we have a sponge that's missing, when we actually count at the end of the case, we start at the beginning. These come in 5 counts of 5, so we always count in counts of 5. And at the end of the case, if for any reason we have a sponge that is missing, we will do an X-ray. That is 100%. It tells us if the sponge is in because this is X-ray detectable.
But it's not foolproof. Just ask Judge Bailey. The sponges his hospital used were supposedly X-ray detectable.
The count record that they kept showed that all the sponges that had been placed in me had been removed. One of the problems I had, in addition to everything else, was 2 different radiologists looked at the follow-up X-rays and CAT scans and failed to identify the sponge.
As a result of Bailey's botched case, Good Samaritan Hospital in West Palm Beach switched to the sponges made by RF Surgical Systems. The company says more than 200 hospitals use their sponges, including UC San Diego and Naval Medical Center San Diego in Balboa Park. The average cost to settle a case of an object left inside a patient is around $350,000. Nationwide each year, hospitals and surgeons have to pay out a total of more than $1 billion in claims for these mistakes. Kevin Cousins says don't forget the human toll.
Each one of these statistics have a patient's face on them, issues where they've got to go back in and be reoperated on, maybe losing sections of their intestine, or maybe losing the ability to have children, having to have hysterectomies. There's real consequences to retained objects. Sometimes there isn't, but it hits the whole gamut.
I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the next NewsHour, the latest on airstrikes and rockets in Gaza and Israel, 1 week into the Middle East conflict. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
The organization Moms United to End the War on Drugs wants families to do something very unusual this Thanksgiving. Peggy Pico finds out why they want pictures of empty chairs.
A lot of moms take holiday pictures, but a new project called Moms United to End the War on Drugs hopes photos of an empty place setting or chair at the holiday dinner table will change America's policy on illegal drugs. Here to tell us more about the project and organization is Gretchen Burns-Bergman, Executive Director and co-founder of the group A New Path and the project, Moms United to End the War on Drugs. Gretchen, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for bringing focus to this.
Specifically, what are you asking, not just moms, but families to do on the Thanksgiving dinner table?
Well, it's already happening. We're asking people to post a picture of a chair with their loved one who's been missing in past from holiday tables, and either a sign that says stigma, incarceration, drug war violence, overdose, to show that this is why they've been missing from past holiday tables, and to post those now, and then at Thanksgiving to actually set a chair and a setting at the table and take a picture of that and send those to us.
Why?
To end the war on drugs. My son was born in 1971, the same year that President Nixon declared war on drugs. And since that time, it's been really devastating, not just to families, but to our whole communities. In terms of loss of life, loss of liberty, we're stigmatizing and criminalizing people who use drugs or who have addictive illness, like my sons do.
Your sons left a couple of empty seats at the table. Tell us a little bit about that.
My older son, who was born in 1971, was arrested about 20 years ago for possession of marijuana, which started a 10-year cycling in and out of the prison system, for nonviolent drugs. And he's not the only one. We've seen this, it's tripled, marijuana arrests have tripled since that time in the last 20 years. So there was times when he wasn't there because he was behind bars, and I didn't know whether I belonged at the family table or visiting him, and that sort of tug and pull. But also stigma, as my younger son has been missing in the past because the family said, oh, let him hit its bottom. Many years of traveling this road.
Stigma within the family, not
just
even
within the family. You know?
Let's talk about the drug policies. What is it about the war on drugs or drug policies that you think is wrong and should be changed?
Well, we've been handling this as if it's a criminal justice issue, as if it's bad people doing bad things. Instead, what it really is addiction's a chronic relapsing disorder, and it needs to be handled with harm reduction strategies, with science-based.
Such as?
Well, what everybody thinks of when you say harm reduction is needle exchange, but there's also things like methadone. There's also not using tough love, but understanding and being compassionate and keep dragging them back to treatment. Unfortunately, there's no treatment dollars. We're spending so much money on the criminal justice system. It costs us $49,000 a year to incarcerate somebody, and yet there's no education, there's no drug treatment, there's in the community or behind bars. So we're wasting our precious resources. And this is a major problem. Addiction is a big problem, and we're losing, people are losing their lives. It's more common to die of an overdose death now than vehicle accidents in some states.
Let me ask you this. A lot of people would say, listen, you break the law, and it is the law. You belong behind bars. So why do you think, what would you tell those people, why, drug crime should be treated any different than any other crime?
Well, I don't believe that drug use should be a crime. Particularly, a lot of these are marijuana use. And so a person like my son wastes 10 years at what cost to society of his life. Oftentimes it's not just a life interrupted, but it's a life interrupted forever, because then they get out of jail and they haven't got any drug treatment. So they still have their drug problems, but they can't get housing, they can't get employment. Oftentimes the family shun them, and they go right back. And so we're wasting such resources on people who we're arresting people for what they put into their body, and we're seeing some people being put away for 80 years for drug crimes, when child molesters and murderers are getting away with less. It's kind of cattywampus.
This is obviously very personal for you. You've had a lot of personal experience with it. What do you want to tell other families about what they should do if they have somebody missing from their table this Thanksgiving because of drugs?
we'd like you to speak out. There's 1 in 4 families are dealing with addictive illness, and now that means so many more are also dealing with the criminal justice system. But because it's so highly stigmatized, they're not speaking about it. So we're inviting them to speak out, because I think mothers together, as mothers have throughout history, protecting their families, been able to change laws and policies for the sake of the health and well-being of their families. So I'm asking them to send in these pictures. Let's get a wall of pictures, and let's just push those out and create awareness so that we can change these policies.
Okay, now our viewers can see these pictures on our website, kpbs.org. Gretchen Birds-Bergman, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you so much.
Recapping tonight's top stories, a report from San Diego's independent budget analyst contradicts forecasts by Mayor Jerry Sanders about the city's financial future. While the mayor has been projecting surpluses, the IBA is predicting deficits because of uncertainties about pension reform and redevelopment. It's only Tuesday, but some serious bargain hunters are already lining up for Black Friday deals. This is the longest holiday shopping period since 2007, with 32 days between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And SeaWorld is buying Not Soak City in Chula Vista. In Chula Vista, the South Bay Park will be converted into Aquatica, a water park including exotic animals. Aquatica San Diego, scheduled to open in June. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.